It's 10 o'clock. I'm Yalda Hakim, live in Beirut, where tensions in this region show no sign of cooling. Tonight, Israel escalates its war on Hezbollah with a relentless bombardment of airstrikes into southern Lebanon. Sky News reports from the city of Haifa, which has seen some of the furthest strikes into Israel in the conflict so far. And in the West Bank, Israeli forces shut down the offices of the broadcaster Al Jazeera.
Also coming up this hour, difficult questions over donations and gifts dominate the first full day of the Labour Party conference. Prosecutors admit they failed to bring charges against Mohammed Al-Fayed when he was alive, as more women allege he was a serial sexual predator. And Sri Lanka has a new president, voted in as the change candidate and vowing to fight corruption. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30.
Good evening. I'm Yalda Hakim, live from Beirut, where international concern is growing over a wider regional all-out war. Both Israel and Hezbollah have intensified their cross-border confrontation, exchanging heavy rocket fire at the end of a week which saw audacious attacks targeting pages and radios and which inflicted severe blows on the Iran-backed militant group. Hezbollah has described it as an open-ended battle of reckoning and vowed to retaliate. Well, let's just take a closer look at the situation around the border of Lebanon and northern Israel. Israel has continued to launch a wave of airstrikes just days after 45 people were killed in Beirut in the deadliest attack in decades. Meanwhile, Hezbollah sent more than 100 rockets north of the border, deeper into Israeli territory, hitting places including Haifa. From there, our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports.
After days of being hit hard by Israel, Hezbollah struck back on Sunday morning. The attack, about 150 missiles, was less than many expected, but Hezbollah aimed deeper than it has previously, targeting the city of Haifa. Most of the missiles were intercepted, but 2 houses were hit. The owners narrowly survived.
First of all, I saw the commotion. Many people were running from place to place. There was such trauma and a sort of drama that was here. When we arrived, we saw burnt vehicles.
Hezbollah says this was only part of their response. More is expected. Hezbollah said that they were targeting Israeli military bases, but this is a residential area, and some of the houses seem to have taken a direct hit. And almost all of the walls of houses close by and many of the cars are peppered with the holes of shrapnel from the blast. Israel has said it will continue hitting Hezbollah. The full Israeli cabinet met today to discuss their next moves.
No country can tolerate shooting at its residents, shooting at its cities, and we, the State of Israel, will not tolerate it either.
Both Hezbollah and Israel claim they do not want war, but at the same time, both sides are escalating their attacks, and despite grave international concern, there is no sign of diplomacy bringing calm. Israel's president told Sky News his country is determined to win.
Lebanon has been hijacked by a terror organization, which is also a political party in Lebanon, called Hezbollah. It's been armed to its teeth by the Iranian empire of evil. We don't want to get to war. We don't. We want to bring our citizens back to their homes on the border with Lebanon.
Our Al Jazeera office in occupied West Bank has just been raided by...
On Sunday morning, Israeli forces raided Al Jazeera's offices in Ramallah and closed the channel down on orders from the government. Al Jazeera broadcast live as it was happening. Northern Israel remains on high alert. People have been told to stay near bomb shelters and schools are closed. There is a feeling that these are only the early days of what could be an extremely violent and chaotic war. Neither side is backing down. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, near Haifa.
Well, our special correspondent Alex Crawford is here in Beirut. She's been at the funeral of Ibrahim Akil. He was the top Hezbollah commander who was killed in Friday's Israeli airstrike. Have a listen.
They gathered in their thousands in the Lebanese capital in a huge show of support for Hezbollah, but also staunch defiance in the city still reeling from multiple attacks over the past week. The loss of one of the Hezbollah key commanders and part of his elite force has hit hard this, the most powerful militant group allied with Iran. But with words that will chill the West, the group's deputy leader promised a battle without limits against Israel.
You will die in fear, your economy will be destroyed, and your unity will fall apart, and you will not achieve your goals.
Well, there seems to be absolutely no indication that Hezbollah is going to back down. In fact, their leaders are promising even tougher action than what's already been seen.
Hezbollah quickly released a video of the Fayed 1 and 2 long-range rockets they fired for the first time since October, when they entered the war in solidarity with Gaza. They're among 100 that they launched early Sunday in another dramatic escalation and the deepest they fired into Israeli territory over the past year. Israel's widely blamed for mounting 3 attacks inside a week in Lebanon, which have rocked the country and Hezbollah. This airstrike in the capital in the days after exploding pagers and walkie-talkies. Emergency teams are still picking through what's left of 2 large apartment blocks in Beirut. The Israeli forces targeted the Hezbollah commander and his elite group, but there's been a heavy toll of civilian casualties as well, with whole families wiped out in the bombing, including the Farah's family of 9 and all 4 of their young children. Naya Ghazi is another toddler killed in the Beirut bombing. The little girl featured in a popular Lebanese TikToker's video. The rescue teams still haven't managed to retrieve her body, nor her father's, grandfather's or aunts. It's taking days to reach many of those buried in the rubble. The deaths of so many families has incensed the Lebanese Prime Minister and his cabinet, who are not Hezbollah, and have been urging the militant group to show restraint against Israel. But restraint seems off the agenda now, with this spate of attacks on top of an intense cross-border bombing around the border. The attacks from their neighbour seem to be galvanising resistance instead from the old and the young.
We definitely don't want an all-out war, and the only one who will decide this is Netanyahu. But if he wants it, we're ready for it.
You can't blame us for being negative. And of course, and they're bombing us. Yeah, if you were bombed in America or Britain, you would say that that's terrorists. We can also say that that's terrorists, and we are being killed. My future is being broken in front of my eyes.
I am nervous. I know, and I'm scared, but I can't express it because I believe in Sayyid Hassan, and I believe and I trust Hezbollah, and I know that we are not gonna lose because we're strong, and if we trust the thing, it will happen. And yes, I love you, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah.
The cross-border exchanges are reaching new, more dangerous heights, with Israel saying strikes like these inside Lebanon are just a precursor for the next stage, and Hezbollah vowing to fight on until there's a ceasefire in Gaza. The stage is set for a very long and bloody conflict. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Beirut.
Well, let's go to our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Buncle, who joins me now live from Haifa in northern Israel. And Ali, clearly there is a heightened sense of alert where you are, and there are some restrictions now in place.
Yeah, Yalda, it's barely 90 miles between where I am here in Haifa and where you are in Beirut. They feel very close to the conflict here. The Israeli government has put this region under heavy restrictions. Schools are closed, many of the restaurants and shops are shut. The streets around here are very quiet, and they suffered their first barrage of rockets from Lebanon here this morning for many years. Now, as I said in my report, 150 missiles from Lebanon sounds like a lot, but over the recent months there have been far larger barrages, and I think many people thought that Hezbollah's response would be bigger than it has been so far. Some people suggest to me that it may be because Hezbollah is in some disarray. Others are suggesting it could be a sign that Hezbollah wants to de-escalate. But most people think that there is more to come. Perhaps the worst is still to come. And both sides show no sign of wanting to de-escalate. The Israeli government clearly feels that it is on the front foot. They feel they've got the momentum, and there are voices within the cabinet, of which they met today in full. There are voices within the cabinet who are urging more, urging a full-scale ground invasion, and some of those voices include senior military figures. For now, that hasn't happened, but they seem continued to push ahead with airstrikes to debilitate Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, for their part, also show no sign of backing down.
Ali, thanks so much for bringing us up to date there. And of course, we are following all the developments here from Beirut, and the rest of the region will be here throughout the week to give you more analysis. But for now, with the rest of the day's news, Gillian, back to you in the studio.
Yalda, thank you. Less than 3 months after sweeping to election victory with a huge majority, the continuing row over donations and gifts is casting a shadow over the Labour Party conference. The Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, and other cabinet ministers spent more time defending uncomfortable questions about payments for birthday parties and trips to New York than discussing government policy. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates.
Prime Minister and Deputy Leader of the Labour Party.
The first Labour conference since massive electoral success. Basking in the applause, setting out the agenda. From the podium, this is what they want you to see.
You entrusted us with the task of change, and we will not forget it.
My job is to tell a new story about the United Kingdom abroad.
We've already begun. Creating the National Wealth Fund, a railways bill, a buses bill, ending the doctor strike.
Change was meant to mean leaving the scandal of the Tory years behind, but awkward questions about freebies and donors have followed Labour to Liverpool.
Your declaration showed that you received £14,000 from the Labour donor Lord Ali last year. What for exactly?
It was used to fund 2 events, all of which was declared properly and thoroughly. That's why that information is in the public domain. The first event was ahead of my birthday, so I was turning 40.
If a Tory had done that 2 years ago, I know exactly what you'd be saying to me this morning. They should pay for their own birthday parties.
Look, this was in a work context.
All around this conference, the talk is of freebies. After it emerged, the same donor behind that birthday party and Keir Starmer's clothes also lent his New York apartment to the Deputy Prime Minister.
It was a personal holiday, and I think I followed the rules. In fact, I went above that, and I wanted to do that to be transparent about the connection that I had of the use of that apartment.
One minister justified the freebies, saying that it was for a work event. Another said they were fine because it was for a private holiday. In truth, nobody really knows what to say about the freebies, and this conference is struggling to escape from a self-inflicted wound. The party hopes that the Chancellor's speech tomorrow will change the narrative, but another donor, this time a big union boss, looks intent on making life tricky again.
A conference vote tomorrow on cutting winter fuel allowance, another potential embarrassment.
It's a cruel policy. He needs to reverse it. Good people who want Labour to do well are finding it, quite frankly, embarrassing. Quite frankly, embarrassing that we are in a situation where we're taking that money off of the poorest in our society.
This conference was meant to be a celebration, but doesn't feel like it. One Labour MP posted she's sickened by the donations.
Does the Prime Minister have control over his party?
Cabinet ministers desperate to avoid more questions on this.
Does the Prime Minister have control of his party?
Oh, come on, of course he's got control. Look at the conference. Enjoy it.
He has 3 days to convince the rest of his party.
And our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, joins me now. Sam, are you getting a sense of frustration at the Labour conference that they just can't move on past these headlines over freebies and gifts? What are the delegates saying to you?
Oh gosh, yes, Gillian. Frustration and irritation from the cabinet down about the public conversation around Labour's inaugural conference after getting back into power after 14 years. Fingers being pointed, I have to say, at number 10 by all parts of government who worry about the way the heart of power is dealing with all of these allegations. Look at how things have been going today. Ministers contradicting each other on broadcast media interview rounds about why freebies were acceptable. You have the donor at the heart of so many of these stories, Lord Wahid Ali, actually at the conference, but largely staying in this room, only occasionally coming down to the lobby, while Sue Gray, the powerful chief of staff to Keir Starmer, well, she hasn't come to Liverpool at all. We are told that's because she's preparing for international summits that Keir Starmer will go to later in the week, but none of it feeling terribly comfortable to people in government that I'm talking to. But I wonder, Gillian, whether or not there's a bigger problem. Had the freebies and the stories about staff salaries not dominated the newspapers, the airwaves, the conversation today, what would Labour be telling the country? A series of small announcements about housing and planning seemed all that they were determined to talk about. Where is the big picture, the message that could land, the thing that people will feel is making a difference? Some concede quietly that is missing. The question being asked here is, do they know what they are? Do they not know what they are saying because they just haven't worked out the communications, or do they not know what they are saying because they haven't worked out the full destination of this government ultimately yet?
OK, Sam, thank you. As allegations of sexual abuse against the late owner of Harrods, Mohammed Al Fayed, grow, it's emerged a second opportunity to bring him to trial was missed by the Crown Prosecution Service. It's already been widely reported that the CPS did not have enough evidence to prosecute an allegation in 2009. But what we now know is that another claim brought by the Metropolitan Police in 2015 was also shelved. Sky's Rhiannon Mills reports.
As the number of victims keeps rising, the failures to stop Mohammed Al Fayed become abundantly clear. The Crown Prosecution Service, the latest, deciding not to prosecute him in both 2009 and 2015 after being passed files by the police. The Victims Commissioner at the time firmly blaming the culture inside the CPS.
Frankly, the CPS then were a sort of dustbin into which complaints about gender violence just fell. It was like negativity was what surrounded them. That is a very symptomatic story of the way the CPS defend themselves when they should have prosecuted and they haven't.
There have been multiple attempts to expose Fayed. In 1995, he sued Vanity Fair after it alleged sexual misconduct and racism. 2 years later, a documentary shared multiple employees' stories. Over a decade later, a 15-year-old reported an assault to the police, but the CPS dropped the case. Another case was dropped in 2015. 2 documentaries alleging sexual abuse followed in 2017 and 2018. And in 2018, 2021 and 2023, the Met Police asked the CPS for advice on investigating Fayed. Only now, with a new documentary, are those who turned a blind eye being held to account.
There was a systematic enabling of the recruitment of vulnerable women for the purposes of their sexual exploitation by Mohammed Al Fayed within the Harrods organisation.
With his death last year, those who were abused feel freer to speak. Al Fayed using his wealth to frighten those who tried to report him.
And wherever he was hunting ground for him. He acted with impunity. The problem that many of journalists found in bringing Fayed to book were, of course, the libel laws, which were pretty draconian, but worst of all, the judges were unwilling very often, and mostly, to actually side with the journalists against people like Fayed.
Senior executives who used to work at Harrods have told us how toxic and unpleasant it was to work for Al Fayed, with one describing his behaviour generally towards people as abhorrent, and that's before you even consider the sexual abuse. He thought that he was untouchable, and there were people around him prepared to help keep it that way.
I own the shop and no one ever will be able to take away from me. Only God.
His generous donations to charities were part of his front. Cancer Research UK among those saying they'll now reconsider their future links with his foundation. For too long, his victims suffered, their courage to stand up only ignored. Now those who could have stopped Fayed sooner in his absence must answer for him. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Time now for a look at some of the day's other top stories. And latest figures show 707 migrants arrived in the UK yesterday on 11 small boats across the Channel. Sky News filmed Border Force boats bringing people into Dover on 3 different occasions on Saturday. More than 24,000 people have crossed the Channel so far this year, with the highest number arriving in June, when 882 people made the journey in a single day. At least 51 people have died and another 17 have been injured in an explosion at a coal mine in Tabriz in eastern Iran. A methane leak is thought to be the cause. 4 people have been killed and 18 injured in a mass shooting in the US state of Alabama. Police say several suspects opened fire on a large group of people who were outside in a public area in Birmingham. They believe the shooting was not at random, but are still hunting for the gunman. To Sri Lanka now, where Anura Dissanayake has claimed victory in the country's presidential election, promising to fight corruption. It was the first since an economic collapse sparked widespread protests in 2022, prompting the then-president to flee the country. Our correspondent Neville Lazarus reports from the capital, Colombo, a warning there is flash photography from the start.
Sri Lanka has a new president, 55-year-old Anura Dissanayake, a Marxist leader who ran on an anti-corruption platform and for change. Even though he and his party have had little or no experience of governance, the people chose him, as they are disillusioned with traditional parties led by dynastic families that have ruled the country for decades.
For the last 3-4 years, we have been planning for this, we have been discussing, and we have prepared a very well-planned manifesto with a lot of action plans, and a lot of thousands of professionals and stakeholders are consulted, and they are still part of our project.
At rallies, the party attracted the young and their enthusiasm contagious. Restless for a change, they were drawn to the outsider, challenging the status quo. You call on us to fulfill your expectations, your aspirations, your dreams, he tells the crowd that have been waiting for hours to hear him. A country yearning to turn a page.
Now that he is elected, the real work begins. It is a crown of thorns that he wears as the country is reeling under severe economic stress and problems, and we have seen unrest in the past.
In 2022, there was anger over the spiraling crisis as the nation and its citizens got bankrupt. People came out on the street to protest. For days, there were pitched battles fought between them and the security forces. The Rajapaksa government was forced to resign, and its president fled the country. Citizens stormed his home and even enjoyed a dip in his pool. A bailout package salvaged some of the pain, but it has come at a price, with harsh austerity measures that resulted in a cost of living crisis. For many, the Marxist ideology of the party and the new president is of concern, and he would need to address it, and soon. He may also find winning the elections an easier task than what is in store for him. Neville Lazarus, Sky News in Colombo, Sri Lanka.
Time now to get all the very latest sports news with Nick.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
We were both so excited to see each other as these little characters in a kid's book. It was brilliant, and we spent a lot of time laughing about doing it. You know, the book is 2 young lads, Kevin and Rob, exploring what heroes mean to them, and to have something that's physical that we completed together, and for it to be the last thing we did, which is such a positive thing as well, is great. And I know little Jackson Burrow, who's 5, has had this book read to him about 100 times and loves it.
Can you try and elaborate a little bit on your relationship and why that bond was so special?
We sat next to each other for 15 years in dressing rooms. You know, Rob was maybe 18 and I was 20, and both trying to make our way. Probably 300 days a year we sat in that dressing room and we chatted of some sort every day, albeit very, very different with Rob because he's crackers and he was crackers. I was there right at the start when Rob was diagnosed. And I think you have a choice to make as a friend. You're either going to be there with somebody or you're not. And it was a really easy decision for me and many of our teammates, I must say, to be there for him. You learn a lot about the M&D community when a friend's diagnosed, and it became apparent really early that people, when they're diagnosed with M&D, often stop getting visitors. Phone stops ringing, stop getting messages. People find it too difficult to confront and face it, and I made a promise that no matter how bad and difficult it got, I'd be there.
Can you share with us a story about your relationship? Maybe it's funny, maybe it's emotional, something that you can share with us that perhaps not too many people know.
Well, there's a fair few I have to erase straight away because they're not for public consumption. We're in a dressing room before a game, and Rob was always there early and always up to no good. He'd be walking around in his Speedos and listening to Al Pacino any given Sunday. And yeah, Danny Maguire came in one day and got stripped off pretty quickly because he was going having some treatment and left his Calvin Kleins out on shore. And Rob made a mark with the Jaffa cake on the Calvin Kleins and left them on shore, and we all waited for Danny to reappear into the dressing room, and you can imagine. So just stuff that kids do.
2, 1, go!
With the book, you touched on it before, the importance of relationships. How important is it for males of all ages, not just children, but to be able to acknowledge close friendships and also talk about them?
Really important. A lot of people from the outside look in and think, oh, these guys are supposed to be tough and aggressive and macho and all those things, that the stigmas that are attached to rugby, but it's all right to be vulnerable at times, and there's nothing wrong with telling each other you care about them and they mean a lot to you, and I think it was important for people to see how much we all cared about Rob. And I'd also say I think it was important for Rob to see how much everybody cared about him.
Can I talk about Lindsay and the kids? It's been a couple of months since his passing. How are they? How are they doing?
I've no doubt they have good and bad days, as we all have when we lose people who are special to us, but he was too young then. He was too special a person to have gone this soon, and leaves a big void for everyone.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right. It's Rob wanted us to live our lives, so it's funny because I know how important The Man in the Mirror was for him as a song, so I get to hear that. That's wherever I go, for whatever reason someone's playing it. Or if I'm going for a run, or I'll look at my watch and check the time, and it always got 7 on it. Rob's adversity, brought the best out of me, taught me to be a better friend, and also taught me that how important giving is, giving of your time, giving of yourself is really important.
4 epic challenges done and dusted, the 5th one in December, running home for Christmas. Tell us about it.
We start with the Santa Dash in Liverpool on the 1st of December, which would be great. We've actually had a Santa running top design for the last day. So, yeah.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the political journalist and broadcaster, Theo Usherwood, and the journalist and author, Rachel Shabby. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Metro. Their headline, Red Flags at Labour Conference. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.